Hey everybody, this is Mr. Mazzoro, and today we're going to finish off talking about botany by talking about plant ecology. We're specifically going to start our discussion of plant ecology talking about the two basic types of plant ecologists and what they study. And then we're going to go specifically into an area known as population ecology. And that studies individual plants, and we're going to study how individual plants grow in response to their environment, why they change in response to their environment, how they change in response to their environment. And this could mean in terms of light, it could mean in terms of gravity, it could mean in terms of what's around them, or it could mean in terms of the changing day length. It could mean a bunch of different things. So let's begin. So, ecology, what is it? In the generalist sense, ecology is the study how living things interact within an environment. And an environment can be as small as a square foot of land, or it could be as large as a continent, or as big as a rainforest, and really anywhere in between. And when you talk about organisms, living things, you could be talking about animals and plants. So what about population ecology? What about community ecology? What about plant ecology, right? Plant ecology mainly concerns itself with two areas of study. The first is population ecology. Population plant ecologists study individual plants, how individual plants react to their environment, how they grow, flower, change from day to day in terms of their environment and what's around them. If you want to start talking about different plants in an environment, or the interaction between plants and non-plant organisms, that's the job of a community ecologist. Community ecologists study different types of plants and the way they interact with their environment, or different types of plants and the way that those plants interact with organisms in their environment. So again, this could mean between plants and animals, plants and plants. It could mean between plants and fungi, and actually really predominant cases. These interactions can be predatory. They can be symbiotic, meaning they both benefit both organisms, or one organism is benefited while the other one is harmed. And it studies how plants actually affect their environment, how removal of some plants or putting in of others actually change the environment in which they're in. Today, we're going to go back and we're going to study population ecology and go over with just some broad strokes what population ecologists study. One of the things population ecologists will study is tropisms, how plants grow and change in response to stimulus. Now, plants don't have nervous systems, so they can't feel anything the way that we feel them. So, how do they know where a stimulus is and where it's coming from? How do they sense anything without a nervous system, without a brain? Well, this stumped population ecologists for a very, very, very long time, until it was found out, really in the turn of the century, that plants, just like humans and especially adolescents, produce hormones, chemicals inside of them, that, just like humans, affect the way they grow. Humans produce hormones, like testosterone, that cause us to go through puberty and mature. Plants produce hormones in response to something around them. This could be light, this can be gravity, or this could even be something touching them. And the production of that hormone causes them to grow in a particular way, what's otherwise known as a tropism. There are three types of tropisms, some of which you've probably noticed, but no one ever told you what it was called, some of which you never really probably thought of. The first is phototropism, plants growing in response to light. Light causes a plant to produce hormones, and those hormones cause them to bend towards the light and away from dark. Another type of tropism, way plants grow, is called gravotropism. And this is something that a lot of people just take for granted until I usually mention it. Whenever I say in class, whenever I tell you to plant a seed, I never tell you, okay, plant this seed this side up so that the stems go up and the roots go down. I never say, hey, don't plant the seed this way, because if you do, then the stems are going to grow into the ground and the roots are going to grow up and the plant's going to die. It's ridiculous to think, actually, that a seed would land on the ground and somehow the stem would go down, the roots would go up, and the plant would die. But in order to sense the not ground, in order for the stems to go into it, and sense the ground in order for the roots to go into that, plants need to sense something. They need to have a hormone that responds to well, in this case, gravity, either growing against gravity in the case of a stem, or growing with gravity downwards in the case of a root. That's called gravotropism. Roots grow down, stems grow up, no matter what way a seed germinates. Last, there's thigmotropism. Thigmotropism is a property of climbing plants. Climbing plants climb on stuff. But again, how do they know where the stuff is to climb on? When a climbing plant touches something, it begins to wrap around it in order to secure itself and then grow up it. But again, plants don't have a sense of touch. They can't sense touch. So how does a climbing plant know it's touching something to wrap around it and climb up it? Again, thigmotropism, that sense of touch, climbing plants growing up something, is caused by hormones. And all of these tropisms, phototropism, gravotropism, or thigmotropism, they're all caused by a series of hormones, but one in particular. That one in particular is this hormone, auxin. Auxin is produced by plants in response to gravity, in response to light or shade, and in some plants in response to touch, and causes the plants to grow towards the light, the stems to grow up, the roots to grow down, or climbing plants to climb up something. It's the production of auxin, a plant hormone, that causes these tropisms, photo, gravo, and thigmotropism. How? Well, these are kind of broad strokes, but just bear with me. It happens differently in each part of a plant, and it happens differently for each tropism. First, phototropism. Phototropism is plants leaning towards the light. When a stem of a plant leans towards the light, the reason it's doing that is because shaded stem cells produce auxin. And auxin causes shaded stem cells to elongate. Those shady cells grow longer than the lit cells. And the effect of one side, the shady side of a plant, growing longer than the other is the plant bends away from dark, or what we call towards light. In the stem, auxin causes phototropism because shady cells produce more auxin, causing the plant to bend away from the shade because the auxin causes those cells to elongate towards the light. Gravotropism is a little bit weird. I already told you stems bend upwards towards the light because the auxin-producing cells causes those cells to elongate. In the roots, it's a different organ, auxin has a different effect. Auxin's a molecule, it's subject to gravity, and therefore auxin settles on the lowest parts of the roots that are lower down in the ground. When auxin gets into plant cells in the roots, or is produced by plant cells in the roots that have more auxin actually don't grow long at all. They actually inhibit elongation. They basically stay the same length. And just like the opposite, the root cells that have less oxygen grow longer. And this causes roots to grow down towards gravity, not up. Auxin settles in the lowest parts of the roots. The areas of the roots that are lower have cells that don't elongate as much as the higher up cells, and as a result, roots grow down. Stems, I already said, auxin causes them to grow up. Last, thigmotropism. Again, a little bit different than the other two. How do climbing plants know when they're touching something to wrap around it? Here's a tendril of a climbing plant. That's what climbing plants use to grab onto, hold onto, and climb up something. But again, how does it know the difference between this bar that it's grabbing onto and air or really anything? Well, here's a close-up of that tendril. Here's the bar or stick that it's grabbing onto, and here are its plant cells. What happens is a tendril first touches a stick. Those touching cells produce auxin. But that auxin is quickly transferred in the tendrils to the non-touching cells. That transfer of auxin to non-touching cells causes them to elongate. We're not in the roots anymore, we're back up in the stems. So the auxin now is causing cells to elongate, not stay short. And that elongation of non-touching cells, kind of like phototropism, causes the plant to bend around whatever it's touching, literally wrap around it over and over and over again. And that's how auxin causes thigmotropism. Plants also respond to day length. And this is very important because plants only really want to flower when their pollinators are present to pollinate them. And you might have noticed if you look around that some pollinators are present in the spring, some are present in the fall, some are present in the summer, and plants don't want to flower when there's no pollinator. So how does a plant know when to flower? Well, it has to do with the length of day, because length of day changes from spring to summer to fall. Some plants flower when night is longer than day. This would happen in the early spring and early summer. These are called short day plants. Plants that flower in, like I said, oh, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. When night is longer than day, this would happen in the late summer or fall. This would be because there are pollinators around in the late summer or fall. When the day length is longer than night, or there's flashes of light in between that night, those short day plants don't flower. These day lengths or scenarios would correspond to times of the year when their pollinators aren't flying, so they don't want to flower. The opposite of that are long day plants. Plants that flower when the day length is long. This would be early summer or spring. Again, these plants will flower, during flashes of light at night, or when the length of day is longer than night. Long day plants flower when daylight is long. Short day plants flower when daylight is short. This is because their pollinators are flying at the times of year that these day lengths would correspond to. There is a third type of plant, and it's called a day-neutral plant. These flower, as the name would imply, any time really of year. It doesn't matter. And these usually are properties of tropical plants whose daylights and seasons don't vary very much. Last, plants will also respond on a day and night cycle. This is called a circadian rhythm. The most classic example of that would be bean plants. At day, they hold up their leaves so they can photosynthesize more. But at night, their leaves drop down. How do they know when day is or when night is? Well, again, that's a hormone caused by, that's a tropism, again, caused by hormones. So, aside from responding to day length and moving and flowering at a certain time, they can also move their leaves according to day length. Another classic example of this would be like a sunflower. Sunflowers, if you look at from day to day, will actually turn their flower to face the sun all day. They actually rotate, in some cases, 180 degrees per day. So that's that. What do different ecologists study? Well, population ecologists study individual plants. Community ecologists study groups of plants and how they interact with other plants or how they interact with other organisms in their ecosystem. Hormones are chemical messengers that cause plants to grow in particular ways. These ways of growth are called tropisms, and there's 3 of them: photo, thigmo, or gravotropism. The main hormone involved in these 3 tropisms is auxin. In phototropism, it causes the shaded cells to grow longer in a stem than the lit cells, phototropism. In gravotropism, it causes root cells to do the opposite. The lower down root cells don't elongate as much as the non-further down root cells, and so roots turn towards the ground. In thigmotropism, auxin is produced by tendrils that touch something, the cells that are in contact with something, and then it's transferred to the cells that aren't in touching that thing, which causes the tendril to wrap around whatever it's touching because the non-touching cells grow longer than the touching cells. Plants respond to day length according to short day plants and long day plants. Short day plants flower when the day is short. Long day plants flower when the day is long, or there's day neutral plants. There's also circadian rhythms, plants that move every single day in response to when there is or is not light. And this is to maximize photosynthesis, or in the case of short day, long day, and day neutral plants, to maximize your chance of flowering when your pollinators are present and not hibernating. Stay tuned for the next lesson. What I'm going to go over is community ecology and what they study, and I'll see you then.